2010, DreamWorks Animation released the first How to Train Your Dragon movie, which, in my not so humble opinion, I consider to be a pretty much perfect movie. The story, the score, especially the score, the animation, everything was so well done. I absolutely love this movie still to this day. It had a huge impact on me and still continues to impact my life to this day, 16 years later. Of course, I finally get to sit down to record this and there's noise outside. It wouldn't be one of my videos if that wasn't the case. Then in 2014, they released a sequel. Not quite as good, but still very solid. It continued with the spectacular animation and the score, also still really good. And it carried through the themes of coming of age and the weight of leadership and acknowledging that sometimes it's not easy to change the world. It's a pity they never released a third movie. Yes, I know they released a third movie. That's the joke. The joke is that I'm in denial because, my God, I cannot stand this movie. Hi, I'm Eret, and welcome to my channel where I talk about whatever's on my mind. And this week, what's on my mind is How to Train Your Dragon 3, and how I feel that movie is such a betrayal of everything the first two movies represent, both in their storyline and also how I think it was a complete betrayal of the fandom. And normally I'm someone who says fandom isn't necessarily entitled to creators of the original work giving them what they want. I am a firm believer that if fandom should not influence how a story is made. However, in this case, the third movie undercuts itself, and it undercuts the first and second movies so badly in a way that I quite frankly find rather deplorable. Okay, second try, I was able to say that through. I find it kind of deplorable, and we will get to that here in a little bit. Technically, I kind of made a video on this subject back in 2019 when this movie first came out, but I was very angry at the time, and let's give this another shot, okay? And also, I've collected my thoughts more in that time. In preparation for this video, of course, I rewatched the movie night before last. And I really tried to give it a fair shake. I tried to be like, you know what, I'm less angry now. My expectations are probably a little lower. I'll give it another chance. Maybe it will surprise me. It surprised me, all right, by being even worse than I remembered, especially when it comes to the themes. So, you know what? Here, I'll be generous, and I'm going to start with what I like about this movie, okay? Pay attention, don't blink, or you might miss it. The animation is spectacular in some points. Honestly, the overall rendering of the animation, some of the details look kind of weird. The clouds look really good. I'll say that. I think the clouds are gorgeous, especially when Toothless and the Light Fury go flying. I think that's absolutely spectacular. Jay Baruchel gave a pretty solid performance for Hiccup. I think that's about it. We're not going to talk about Eret yet. There will be a whole section on that for the people who know me and know my channel. I'm sure they're going to be waiting. We will get there, but we're going to talk about everything else first. Now, to get to some of my criticisms, before I get into the themes and the story and stuff, I'm just going to say I cannot stand this soundtrack. And here's the thing. The score, the music, is not bad per se, But when I'm listening to my music on shuffle and any of the songs from the first two movies come up, I know it immediately. They have such a distinct sound. John Powell did an incredible job building the world of Burke through the music. But anytime a song from the third movie comes up, I have to check if it's from How to Train Your Dragon 3 or Frozen 2. It just feels so generic Disney. There is nothing distinct about that soundtrack. And even when I was watching the movie again, none of the score stands out. None of the score gets my attention. But quite frankly, that is all the writing of this movie deserves. I'm sorry. I can get offended and be like, what was John Powell doing? But at the same time, the movie doesn't deserve a better score. It doesn't deserve a forbidden friendship. It doesn't deserve a test flight. I stand by that. Quite frankly, I don't know how else to feel about it. Is just, this movie did not deserve a score as good as the first one had. And even the second one, not quite as good as the first, but still fantastic. Each of the three movies ends with a song from, I believe it's Icelandic creator Jonesy. And he has this really distinct, dreamy style. Sticks and Stones for the first movie, We Go Where No One Goes from the second one, and then for the third one, the best song on the entire score is Together from Afar. And it's the best song in the whole score, like I said, and it's pure emotional manipulation. But we'll get to that later. So, let's see. How to Train Your Dragon 3 opens a year after the second movie, and we know this because they tell us in the dialogue that it's been a year. They tell us this twice, first from Valka and then from Grimmel, the villain. A few people who are implied to be Drago's warlords are trying to fill the power vacuum left by Drago to still conquer the world with dragons, but without an alpha to control them. I have no idea what their plans are. I also have no idea who these characters are. They are less than plot devices. They appear, they have fairly distinct appearances, but like, am I supposed to be threatened by these people? Are they supposed to be bumbling? Are they supposed to... I don't know. Like, they're trapping dragons and they seem to be doing a decent job at that. Except for the fact that, Hiccup keeps coming. What am I supposed to think about these people? It's such an odd choice to go with. And here's the thing. You absolutely could do a story where Hiccup is dealing with the warlords left behind by Drago. I think that's an interesting concept. But you need to actually give me a reason to... Am I supposed to fear them? How am I supposed to feel about these characters? I don't know. You're not giving me anything to work with, so I don't know what to think about them. You would have to do so much more work with these characters to make a story like that work, quite frankly. But they bring in Grimmel the Ghastly, and here is another issue. Like, I'm just gonna be all over the place with this. I'm not going in any kind of order. This is just me finally getting all my thoughts about this movie out. Because I need to. Because I've been thinking a lot about How to Train Your Dragon and stuff like that. And I need to get it out, okay? This is my channel where I talk about what's on my mind. And I'm finally getting all these things out of my mind and onto a video where people can either hear them and agree or hear them and disagree. That's up to you. But if you disagree, I don't really know why you're watching the video. Just, anyway. So, Grimmel the Ghastly. What a disappointment. This Grimmel the Ghastly is such a cardboard cutout of a villain. Like, I'm supposed to be afraid of him. Clearly, we're told basically that he is a one-man killing machine who hunted the Night Furies to very near extinction, and quite frankly to extinction, because regardless of what happens in the third movie with Toothless and the Night Fury, once Toothless dies, Night Furies are extinct. There's no bringing them back. Congratulations, writing team. You just made an entire species of dragons extinct, especially if the Light Fury is supposed to be a completely distinct species from the Night Fury, or a subspecies, or whatever it is. The point is they're supposed to be something different from the Night Fury. So, congratulations, you just rendered an entire species extinct. I hope you're proud of yourselves. But at the same time, like, what is his motivation? His motivation is, oh, he killed a Night Fury, and his village treated him like a hero, and so he said, okay, I'll go kill more Night Furies. So you're chasing the high of people treating you like a hero. That's the implication, is you liked people celebrating you, and so you decided to go hunt. Okay, it's such a paper thin motivation. It does not do anything. And compared to the villains of the previous movies, the Red Death in the first movie, Drago in the second movie, I'm supposed to be scared of Grimmel? He's nothing compared to that. Even then, he feels like an almost... It almost feels like they want him to be Viggo Grimborn from the Race to the Edge series. But, like, I actually believe Viggo Grimborn was a threat. Grimmel, the movie, just tells me he's a threat, and everyone acts like he's a threat, but I don't necessarily believe it. Like, what is he compared to Drago? And also, why should I care? His motivation is nothing. It's so trivial in a story that is supposed to have some depth. And I don't subscribe to the idea that just because it's a children's animated movie doesn't mean that the writing isn't worthy of criticism. The first two movies are great, regardless of the fact that they are children's or family movies, depending on how you want to put it. And I think it's totally fair to say that children deserve good movies. If you want them to learn to appreciate good storytelling, and if you want them to start developing the ability to think complex thoughts, you have to give them complex stories. Like, okay, look, I used to have this skirt that looked like Toothless's tail, right? It was half black and half red with a high-low hem, so it was longer in the back, and it had the symbol from Toothless's tail on the back. And at one point I was at Walmart, and this was in like 2017, I think. So 3 years almost after the second movie came out, and this girl, maybe 6 years old, comes up to me and she's like, oh, your skirt is Toothless. I love Toothless. Well, except there was that time when I didn't. And I didn't even have to ask. I knew exactly what she meant. She was talking about when Toothless killed Stoic in the second movie. This little 6-year-old girl was struggling with loving Toothless, but also reconciling with what Toothless had done in the second movie. And that's fine. Kids are capable of that complexity. It gives them a chance to start working through complex problems and developing problem-solving skills. And that's why I think oversimplifying children's movies is a disservice to them. I'm just saying. So, anyway, I better keep going because I've got quite a list, and we're just gonna have to ignore the sounds from outside. So, you remember how I said that, like, Valka and Grimmel both tell us it's been a year since the last movie, and the movie, through dialogue, tells me that I should be afraid of Grimmel and I should find Grimmel intimidating. This movie, watching it again the other night, I was so struck with how exposition heavy the dialogue is. And like, there is good exposition and there's bad exposition. Like, you look at, what was it? The second movie, where Eret and Stoic both have moments to talk about and talk up what an intimidating villain Drago is. And even as they're saying, oh, he's building a dragon army, he's doing these things, you see how nervous Eret is. You see him touching his scar. You see that he is scared of this man. And even when we see Drago, we see Eret's entire body language being, oh shit. He's scared. This big muscle-bound guy, again, we'll talk about Eret more later, this big muscle-bound guy is shrinking. He's making himself small. He is trying to avoid Drago's attention because he knows this man can hurt him. He knows this man can kill him. That is how you show me I should be afraid of this villain. It's not just by telling me that I should be afraid of him. I didn't actually expect to spend this much time just talking about Grimmel, but there is, again, compared to the previous villains and even the villains of the shows, which, what is Grimmel? Grimmel is nothing. And yet I'm supposed to believe that Grimmel, who is nothing compared to these other villains, is enough to make Hiccup give up everything? Is enough to make Hiccup turn his back on everything he believes in? Everything he has fought for the past 6 years? Grimmel the Ghastly is enough to make him do that? When Drago Bloodfist wasn't? When Vigo Grimborn wasn't? When any of these other villains weren't? Grimmel? Who was defeated, and yet he still won because Hiccup still gave up? It is... Okay, I'm gonna just bring this up now. It is so... What's the right word? I find it upsetting. There's a good word. I find it upsetting and rather questionable that we had 2 movies talking about doing what you believe is right and fighting for what you believe is right and fighting to make the world a better place. And for 2 movies where the second movie ends with Hiccup giving a speech about how they are stubborn and they're crazy and they're resolute, but they won't back down from what they believe in. He will not give up on the world that he wants to build. And then the theme of the third movie is just give up. Just give up. You can't build a better world. You can't change anything. So just give up. Just shove your problems in a hole in the middle of the ocean and walk away. And you have to give up your friends and your adventures and settle down and get married. And that has to be the end of your life. What a terrible message. And here's the thing. If you are familiar with me and my channel, you'll know I still am very fond of the Rise of the Brave Tangled Dragons fandom, which was a crossover between, of course, Rise of the Guardians, How to Train Your Dragon, Tangled, and Brave. And these 4 movies came out in the space of about... How to Train Your Dragon and Tangled came out in 2010, Rise of the Guardians and Brave both came out in 2012. So they came out very close together, and all 4 of these movies have themes of overcoming. It's overcoming your self-doubt and overcoming the obstacles the world throws at you to find and embrace who you truly are, and teaching that no matter what the world might try to tell you, you're worth more than what they say. How to Train Your Dragon is, just because you're not what the world wants you to be doesn't mean you're not valuable. And sometimes you just need to find your own skill, and you need to find what you're good at and find your own strength. And then other people will accept that once you accept it in yourself. Tangled is a story of overcoming abuse, where even if someone tries to smother who you are, even if someone tries to hide what you are and tries to bring you down, you have to overcome that. You can't let someone dull your light, for lack of a better way. That's one of the things from Tangled. Then you get Brave, which is a little more muddled than some of the others, because it's also like the weakest of the 4 movies. But that is still a case of you have to fight for what you want. Now, you can't be selfish about it, and you have to acknowledge that there are consequences to your actions, but you still have to find the way to achieve your own goals and what you want. And then you get Rise of the Guardians, which is all about finding what makes you you. I am being very profound here, and I'm being very sincere. Oh my god, that actually shut everything up. Or not. I'm being vulnerable. Hush up and let me talk. Rise of the Guardians is very much about finding your center, finding what it is that makes you you. And this is what the appeal of these 4 movies together was. This is why those 4 characters together worked so well, and it's what drew people to it. It wasn't just the shipping. It wasn't just that they all looked good together and they completed something. It was that all these stories carried very similar themes that all spoke to people in the same way. Rise of the Guardians especially, I remember seeing artists talk about how they came out of that movie and it made them want to draw again. It made them want to start drawing. It made them want to pursue a career in animation. That was me. When Rise of the Guardians first came out, I wasn't able to do it, but I wanted to. It just wasn't something I was able to make happen, but at the same time, I started writing fan fiction for this fandom, for this crossover, and it shaped how I create stories to this day, and it was a huge influence on my writing. Oh my god, I just want to get this video done. I'm recording later in the day than I usually do, which is why it's even louder outside than usual on a Sunday. Okay, I closed my window. Hopefully it'll be quieter now. There was something incredible and almost magical about the fact that these 4 movies all came out so close together with all these interconnected themes that created something. And it's been lost a bit today, and maybe I'm looking at it too deeply. But to take this fandom, to take these movies, or just a part of these, and I can't separate the 4 movies. Okay, I can't. They are one to me. So I can't just talk about How to Train Your Dragon without mentioning this symbiosis that existed between these 4 movies and that created this fandom. But the thing I remember about that fandom, and especially the impact of these movies, was the way it inspired people, and the way it gave people hope, and the way it inspired people to create things and to do things. And then for the 3rd How to Train Your Dragon movie to just be, give up. Just give up. What the fuck? is it's like, I don't think Dean DeBlois even realized what he was writing. And okay, here's the thing. When the second movie came out, one of the things DeBlois and Jibarushal, the voice of Hiccup, talked about in promotional interviews was that they were making it bigger. They were going for a more epic story. They said they wanted these movies to be able to sit on your shelf right next to Star Wars or Lord of the Rings. And so it's like, we know that's what they were going for. They were going for big. They were going for epic. And with the second movie, you know what? I'll say that they got there. I don't think it was as strong as the first one, but they did build out the world in a realistic way. Here's the thing, and I'm fairly certain this is what happened with the third movie. Because what not everyone knows, but a lot of people probably do, is that the How to Train Your Dragon movies are based on a series of children's books by Cressida Cowell. Now, I am not someone who believes that the book is always better than the movie, because here's the thing. If you give me first movie How to Train Your Dragon versus first book How to Train Your Dragon, I will pick the first movie every time. But if you ask me to pick between the 12-book series and the 3-movie trilogy, I'm gonna pick the books. Look, when I first read the books, I specifically remember reading the 7th book and starting it and being like, why am I reading this? Am I actually enjoying this? Like, these are kids' books. I was already 18, 19 at this point, and just thinking, I'm really only reading this because Toothless is funny in the books. Like, that was all that kept me going for several books. But book 7 is the one where the themes started to hit. At the end of book 7, Hiccup is talking about the weight of responsibility, and specifically the responsibility of leadership, and talking about how a leader should be a slave to their people to ensure that every king remembers that his responsibility is not to himself and not to his own desires. It should be to his people and to making the world a better place. When I read that, I stopped and I said, okay, I'm listening. Because again, when I sat down and started book 7, I was like, why am I here? Why am I still reading these books? I got to the end and I said, okay, show me what you've got. I'm here. And the rest of those books were an absolute roller coaster of emotions. And the books deal with themes of slavery, of coming of age. The subtitle for the books is Becoming a Hero the Hard Way. Did I mention slavery, leadership, what it takes to be a king, generational trauma, the consequences of actions that were taken years ago? How do I summarize this simply? The line at the end of the third movie where Hiccup says, "There were dragons when I was a boy," that is taken directly from the prologue of the first How to Train Your Dragon book, where Hiccup is talking about how there are no more dragons now that he is old. I always kind of figured he was in his 70s, if not older. The point is, he's much older. He's lived a very long life, and he is looking back on it. And that is how he tells the stories throughout the books, because each book opens and ends with older Hiccup addressing the reader directly and talking about the lesson of each book a bit. Not on the nose, not hammering it in, just kind of, driving the point home a little, and just kind of like, here's what you should take away from this. And so that's where that "there were dragons when I was a boy" comes from. It's not from Dilf Hiccup in his 30s. It's from a Hiccup who is much older, who has ruled the archipelago as king of the Wilder West for decades at this point, who has been on adventures, who has married, had children, traveled, been all these places and seen all these things, and now is looking back. And when we reach the final book, after years of struggle, of years of Hiccup connecting with the dragons, bonding with them, discovering the trauma caused by his own lineage. Okay, no. Here we go. Buckle up, buttercups. I'm gonna break this down not very quickly, quite frankly, because I don't think there's any way to do this, but I'm gonna make it shorter than 12 books, okay? Okay, follow along. Just to break this down very simply, of what I talk about when I say the trauma caused by Hiccup's lineage, okay? Hiccup in the books and movies is Hiccup Horrendous Haddock III, right? Thus implying that there was a Hiccup Horrendous Haddock II and a Hiccup Horrendous Haddock the First. In the books, we find out that this is kind of a really important, crucial detail. About 1,000 years before the book, we had the first Hiccup, and this was a time when Vikings and dragons were at war, and it was bloody and it was brutal. A sea dragoness, Giganticus Maximus, named Merciless, has a prophecy or a vision or something that he will be killed by a human named Hiccup Horrendous Haddock. He sends a younger sea dragoness, Giganticus Maximus, who is not as big yet, to kill Hiccup. Now, the dragon ends up, who we find out later in the books is named the Woden's Fang, ends up caught in a tree, and Hiccup, instead of killing him, frees him, mends his wounds, and saves his life. The two bond, they teach each other their language, so they learn to communicate, and through that, Hiccup is able to bring peace between the humans and the dragons. He builds a better world for all of them, and this lasts for generations of his descendants until a few hundred years later we get Grimbeard the Ghastly, who turns out to be a terrible tyrant who, when his own son is born Hiccup Horrendous Haddock II, because he's a runt, he abandons the boy on a mountain to die or survive, because eugenics is also a theme in the books. The movies definitely don't deal with that one. So yeah, the boy is left abandoned, but he's found by dragons and raised with them, which is where he forms a connection with another sea dragoness, Giganticus Maximus, named Furious. Interesting that there's 3 of those giant sea dragons already. I wonder if that's going to be a theme. Anyway, Hiccup II is eventually reunited with his father, and ends up becoming his favorite son. Now, by this point, Grimbeard has turned the dragons from companions into slaves, and Hiccup is trying to change this. He tries to reason with his father. Unfortunately, one of his other brothers, becoming jealous that he's no longer the favorite, convinces his father that Hiccup and the dragons are trying to lead a revolt against him and throw him off the throne. So Grimbeard, in a fit of fury, kills his son. Now, Hiccup's body is then taken by the sea dragon Furious, who he has a bond with, and I believe Furious had a different name at the time, but I don't remember it right now, and I don't have time to research it. Anyway, point is, Furious takes Hiccup's body and mourns and grieves over it until he becomes so big he has to retreat back into the sea, because when these sea dragons, they grow so big that the land cannot sustain them, so they have to go into the sea, and they usually end up sleeping most of that time until they eventually start to shrink back down enough that they can come back on land. They're still huge, though. So Furious retreats into the ocean, and all the anger and all the hatred he has towards the humans solidifies in his heart because of the grief he had for the fact that they killed his human brother. Fast forward a few hundred years, we get Hiccup Horrendous Haddock III. I'm just going to go ahead and spoil this right now. People love to talk about how in the first book, Hiccup picks his dragon, Toothless, who is small and green. He's believed to be a common or garden dragon. He's the terrible terror that we see in the movies. As you read the story, you find out that is not actually true. Toothless is also a sea dragoness giganticus maximus. I wonder if there's a reason. Now, as Hiccup is going about his life, learning to become a hero the hard way, who shows back up but Furious? Actually, before that, Merciless, the dragon that tried to kill the first Hiccup, shows back up. He's the green death that Hiccup kills in the first book. Unlike the red death in the first movie, they changed that, whatever. So the first dragon Hiccup kills is Merciless, who had a prophecy that he would be killed by Hiccup Horrendous Haddock, but it wasn't the first one, it was the third. So Hiccup is going on all these adventures, he's doing all these things, he's walking right into the prophecy of becoming the heir of Grimbeard the Ghastly, except, following in, destined to become king of the Wilder West as you pick up after a few books. When who comes back but the Dragon Furious? And now the Dragon Furious has been under the water for a very long time, and all he has had was anger and hatred left from the loss and the grief of Hiccup Horrendous Haddock II. Now, at this time, the dragons are still slaves to the Vikings after a couple hundred years, or however long there was between Grimbeard and Hiccup III. So Furious says, you know what, screw it. I'm gonna kill all the humans. And he releases what is called the Blood Red Rage. Now, there are several other MacGuffins that are part of this story and other things that happen, but basically Hiccup has to defeat the villains who are trying to take over the Wilder West. He has to calm the Dragon Furious. He has to convince the Vikings not to treat the dragons as slaves and to accept them as companions again. And this is what Hiccup is doing at the end of the story. Do you see why I say that the books are so much more complex than the movies? Like, I'm sorry I had to go on such a long tangent, but do you see what I mean? That there is a huge difference between the complexity of these stories. And I'm not saying that I needed the movies to give me the multi-generational story of the Hiccups, although, I mean, you could have done something with it. Like I said, the books are told by Hiccup much later in life, and we find out in the epilogue of the final book that yes, he had managed to make peace. He promised Furious that he would do everything in his power to make peace between the Vikings and the dragons, that he would strive to create a world that would be fair and just for both their peoples. We reach the epilogue where Hiccup talks about, at the end of his life, decades later, where he talks about how he's done everything he can to do that. But as he's gotten older and his strength has waned, he has been forced to accept that he can't change the world. He's been forced to accept that the peace between the humans and dragons will not outlast him. That once he dies, things will probably go back to the way they were. And the dragons know this. That's why they've already begun retreating to the sea, because they acknowledge that what Hiccup has done was great, but they know that it won't last without him. And that's why Hiccup wins. That's the thing. Hiccup at 15 years old wins and creates peace. But it's bittersweet because he reaches the end of his life and he knows that it can't last. But the whole point is he still believes that a better world can be created. And he talks to the audience, to the readers who are, this book is aimed for like 8 to 12-year-olds. He talks to these children and says, I hope your world is better. I hope that maybe you live in a world that doesn't carry the same crimes and the same injustices that my world does. I hope there's something better. And it hurts. It's bittersweet because he won, but he lost in the long run. The victory can't last. But you know he did his best and he fought all his life to make it happen. And Toothless stays with him. Eventually, because Toothless is a sea dragoness giganticus maximus, and yes, the goofiness of that name is pretty accurate to how goofy the books are in general, especially at the beginning. But at the same time, like, there's weight there. There's weight to it. There's gravitas. There's something I'm still thinking about all these years later, and I don't think that's just because I'm thinking too much of it. It's the story Cressida Cowell wanted to tell. And so when you reach that end, there is that bittersweet feeling of knowing that, yes, he achieved victory, but it won't last. Compared to the movies, where Hiccup at 21, Hiccup in the books had been ruling for 6 years at that point. 6 years he'd been king of the Wilder West. And he was still fighting, and he would keep fighting for decades. But no, at 21, Hiccup decides that no, we can't change the world. No, I'm just gonna give up. No, I'm just gonna shove my problems in a hole. I hate this movie. I hate this movie so much. Okay. I have a list of the little things that bug me about this movie, so you know what, we're just gonna go through those. So, I mentioned that the dialogue is exposition heavy. The other thing is that there are a lot of one-liners in this movie, but they don't, it doesn't really matter who says them for the most part. Like, characters will walk across screen and say something, and it doesn't matter. There's no depth to the dialogue. It's all so surface level. And what is with the line where Astrid says, "Oh, look at you, embracing change. I'm so proud." Who are you talking to? Oh, Astrid, what are you saying? Hiccup, who revolutionized the entire Viking way of life, who changed her entire world, especially. And you're saying some trite thing about, "Oh, look at you, embracing change." What? What? So there's a scene fairly early on in the movie where he's on the cliffs overlooking Burke, and he has his map open, and he's starting to think about the hidden world. And Toothless is demanding to play with his prosthetic foot like a chew toy, which, weird, and like, Toothless understood the map in the second movie. Like, he was helping with it and he was watching it, but then in this one he just slobbers all over the prosthetic and drops it on the map like a dog dropping a toy with no care, just expecting Hiccup to throw it again. It's such a choice. I don't understand why they did that. But what really bothers me with that scene is it's totally intended to be the Itchy Armpit 2.0 scene from the second movie. Because that scene, whenever anyone talks about how good the Hiccup and Astrid relationship is in the second movie, they point to that scene at Itchy Armpit. I can't believe I'm saying that name with a straight face. But it's such a good scene where Hiccup is talking about his father wanting to give him more responsibility and Astrid encouraging him, and they have a great dynamic, and it's flirty and it's banter. It's very well done. And this scene in the third movie feels like it's trying to be that, but it doesn't work. And like it's the characters and the voices, it's still the same voices and the same characters, and they still have chemistry. So when you first watch it, you're kind of tricked into feeling like, oh yeah, this is just that scene again. This has the same, but it doesn't. They're talking, and Hiccup is like, oh, well, if you don't want to marry me, Snotlout is still available. And I was just like, oh no, he only has eyes for your mom. How does that lead to them wrestling? There's such a disconnect there. And I feel like that's so indicative of the problem with the whole movie. The way that they're just, they're trying to hit points to make you feel what you see. There's this thing about fan fiction where you don't have to build up the characters in order to earn emotional moments, because people are already reading fanfic because they like these characters and they want to see them in those emotional moments. So you can kind of meet halfway, and you don't have to do as much work as you would if these were original characters. I feel like the movie is taking advantage of that, where it's not doing anything to earn these scenes, but they know that, like, oh, if we make it look like they're connecting and bantering and having a romantic moment, you want that, so we'll give it to you, and hopefully you just won't notice that it's not earned. Just like so much in this movie is not earned. Speaking of, what is the Snotlout and Valka subplot? What is that? Why? Who thought that was a good idea? Why would you do that? Like, is there anyone who enjoys that subplot? Like, what does it contribute? What does it do? Why does Valka play into it? I feel like someone had the not so brilliant idea that they wanted to do a Valka Eret Snotlout love triangle, but like they couldn't commit to it. And you know what? Here's where we're gonna talk about this. My channel and my pen name is Song W. Eretson. Yes, this is a reference to Eret because he is my favorite character in this franchise, and I have a huge crush. That is like my okay, not my first love. There's a reason that like I was such a fangirl that my pen name is Eretson, right? Okay, so Eret is kind of a big deal for me. I am very fond of this character, and my big thing going into the third movie is I was so excited to see what they would do with his character. What did they do with his character? Nothing. And it's like, I get Eret is a side character. I get that he had his big emotional arc in the second movie where he was a huge part of the story. He is proof that Hiccup can change people's minds. Maybe he can't change everyone's mind, but he can change people's mind and make them see the world in a different way. And he can bring them around to his way of seeing things. Right. That is the purpose Eret serves in the second movie. Meanwhile, the purpose he serves in the third movie is to carry heavy things across the screen and occasionally drop one-liners and exposition. Now, to be fair, none of the other writers get much of anything in this movie. They are flanderized and cheapened and flattened, and it's made fun of, quite frankly. So, I mean, it's not like Eret was the only one who got shafted, but Eret is the one I care about, so Eret is the one I'm talking about now. I like, again, as a fangirl, I wanted so much more for this character, but I get that he's not a main character. But I feel like in a better story, he would have been better utilized. But also, like, Eret's not smart, right? Like, he's the muscle. He's the brawn, right? Right? There's a reason I like him. But he's not dumb. He's not stupid. And so I don't have a problem with Snotlout being insecure about Eret. I think that's actually a really understandable way to go. Snotlout as the barking chihuahua at the Doberman, or whatever larger dog Eret would be, that works. What doesn't work is Eret being clueless. I feel like Eret knows he's attractive. I feel like Eret knows exactly why Snotlout is trying to have a pissing contest with him. So I don't like him being all, what? What? Strange man. What? My Eret is not dumb. He's not clueless. He would understand exactly what is happening. Just because he's voiced by Kit Harington does not mean he has to know nothing.
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
He's not Jon Snow here. He's Eret, son of Eret. Like, he would not deign Snotlout with a response. Because he has no reason to get into a pissing contest with the yappy little chihuahua. But he would know why it's happening. Yeah, no. So like I mentioned, I feel like someone wanted to do some kind of love triangle between Eret, Valka, and Snotlout, but they didn't actually commit to it, so it's just weird moments between Valka and Snotlout, and her feeding into it at the end. That's gross. That's so weird, especially since Snotlout and Hiccup are cousins in the books. And I know the movie franchise never really did anything with that, but it's still weird. It's still weird. I don't like it. You know what? We know from the Homecoming short that came out after How to Train Your Dragon 3 that Eret's not on Burke anymore. So you know what? I think some point between How to Train Your Dragon 3 and Homecoming, Eret decided Burke, or New Burke, and we'll get to that in a second, just isn't the place for him anymore without the dragons. So he sailed off, and he ended up sailing south, where he landed in what would have been called at the time Caledonia. Caledonia. Yeah, it's Caledonia. And he met a certain red-headed archer princess, and there we go, my crazy crack crossover ship is canon. Took me 10 years, but I got there. No, sorry. It took me 12 years, but I got there. Eret and Merida are canon. Screw it. Don't fight me. You know, the one other note I have in my notebook about this is about New Burke. And this is New Burke. This is the island. Just hundreds of feet straight up of cliffs and plateaus that they're gonna build on, and that we see them build on towards the end of the movie. And I'm looking at this going, this is a cool shot, but it's so impractical. And I realize this is a fantasy movie and not everything needs to make sense, but just the basic idea of how are the Vikings going to live on this island without the dragons? Because they're going to have to build new ships, and they have woods for that. But how are they going to get them down? How are they going to go fishing? How are they going to do anything? And this feels kind of indicative of my issue with the whole movie, where it feels like nothing was thought through. And let's see, this movie came out in 2019, and a few years before that we had Thor Ragnarok, where Odin has the line, Asgard is not a place, it's a people, which is basically like the location of Asgard doesn't matter as long as the people survive. And this movie very much goes into the same thing, which it's the idea that Berk isn't a place, it's the people. The island where these people have lived for hundreds of years doesn't matter as long as the people are there. And for what? Rimmel was enough to chase them out of their homes? I don't get it. Okay, so before anyone says, but Song, you didn't even talk about the Light Fury. What is there even to say about the Light Fury? The Light Fury is a symptom of just how shallow and ridiculous and insubstantial this whole plot, this whole script is. The Light Fury is, as I said, just a symptom. Like, what am I supposed to do with this? What am I supposed to say about the Light Fury, other than the fact that it is such a bizarre choice, and it's honestly gross, and it is so disrespectful of Hiccup and Toothless's friendship, and even just the idea of being able to maintain friendships while being in a romantic relationship. The Light Fury is so shallow. There is nothing to her, and I cannot believe that anyone thought this was a good script. I don't see how anyone thought that this was a good idea. And that's why I have pretty much nothing to say about the Light Fury, because if this script had any more substance, we wouldn't have the Light Fury. Or at the very least, we would have something different that would make more sense and might actually hold up. There's my thoughts on the Light Fury. Also, why is her design so sleek and dumb? And honestly, the comments about her design and how they drawing female characters is harder, and we had to make sure. It sounds misogynistic. I hate to use that word, but it sounds so gross that everything about the Light Fury frustrates me, and as such, that is all I am going to say on the matter. If we had a better script, we would not have the Light Fury. You know, I still love How to Train Your Dragon. I first saw that movie at a very dark time in my life, and it saved my life. And part of why I'm still so passionate about Rise of the Brave Tangled Dragons as a fandom is because I do think there was some kind of magic that brought all four of those movies at the same time. And it saved my life. During several very dark periods of my life, I had those movies that helped get me through, and that fandom and those stories. And that's why it's so painful to see the third movie. And it wasn't even until I was working on putting together this video that I could even put into I was fully able to understand that why it bothers me so much is because of that give up message. Like, Grimmel won. The Night Furies will all be extinct. The dragons are all gone. Hiccup gave up his home. And now there's this weird idea that for Toothless to be with the Light Fury, that's a whole other issue in and of itself. But, for Toothless to be with the Light Fury and for Hiccup to marry Astrid and settle down, they have to give up their friendship, which, The first movie understood this so well. You know, there's the story about how they screened the movie to Steven Spielberg, and he said with that ending scene where Hiccup wakes up and realizes he's lost his foot, Toothless has to be there. If you don't have that, you undercut the entire story and the entire relationship between Hiccup and Toothless, the very heart of the story. You undercut that if he's not there. And then with Gift of the Night Fury, when there's the 2 points where Hiccup slips on the ice, and one time Toothless is there to catch him and another time he isn't, it wasn't just a cute moment. The whole point is that Hiccup and Toothless need each other. This isn't just a friendship, this is a deep bond. It's a partnership that they both need to be whole, that they both need to live. To see that wiped away, to have that built up over so many years. Because again, there was almost 10 years between when the first movie came out to the third movie. To have all those years of emotional investment just cheapened and wiped away, and to have Hiccup and Toothless's bond reduced to just, oh, you gave him his freedom, what did you expect? And for Astrid to say that to Hiccup is quite frankly disgusting. Also, why is that the story? Toothless was never in captivity. He was never a pet. He was always a partner. The idea that Toothless is so obsessed with this female that he has less of a bond with than he does with Stormfly. For him to become so obsessed with the Light Fury that his bond to Hiccup doesn't matter? This friendship doesn't matter? Like, I write fantasy romance. I love romance stories. And I think there is a huge value in romantic relationships, but not at the expense of friendship. Especially not in a story that is based on friendship. On a friendship that changes the world. And in 2019, to release a movie that says, oh, the friendship doesn't matter. Give it all up. Give up your dreams. Give up what you want. Settle down. Get married. I cannot comprehend why anyone looked at that story and thought that was a fitting end to the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy. And I'm sure there are people who like the movie, but I don't get it. And it's not something that I think anyone could change my mind on, because my issues with it run so deep. And it's like, yeah, I have petty nitpicks about some things, but for the most part, it's these deep issues that just undercut the story of the first two. And maybe if I hadn't read the books and I hadn't had that to compare it to, I still think I wouldn't have liked this movie. I still think it would have bothered me. Like, here's the thing. As a writer, I get that endings are hard. But I still don't understand how this is the ending they chose. So, like I said, How to Train Your Dragon 1, practically perfect in every way. How to Train Your Dragon 2 is solid, and it gave me Eret, so it gets serious points for that. It's a shame they've never made a third movie, though. I know sometimes when I watch videos like this and someone says what I've been feeling and they put into words, especially if they put into words something I hadn't quite been able to, that I was feeling but hadn't quite given voice to, I know it can feel really cathartic. So I hope that maybe someone else can get that catharsis from watching this video. Maybe. I hope. And like, here's the thing, I'm sure I'll be lying in bed tonight, or I'll be taking a shower and be like, oh, I forgot to mention this, I forgot to mention that. But I think I'm gonna wrap this up here. And I think I've said everything important that I need to say. And I wasn't even super angry while I did it. So that's a huge improvement over the last time I tried to talk about this subject back in 2019. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. And if you liked it, consider giving it a like. Maybe check out some of my other videos. And if you enjoy those as well, subscribe to the channel. I release new videos every week talking about whatever is on my mind. And yeah, I'm still Rise of the Brave Tangled Dragons trash. So that's kind of a recurring theme. And I'm currently waiting for pictures of what Phil Dunster is going to look like as the live action Eret. So as soon as we get that, and as soon as we get any trailer or teaser or anything for the live action second movie, I will be doing a video about that. But I'm going to wrap this one up here. Again, thank you so much. And until next time, stay safe, take care, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye!